I'm G808.
And I'm DJD.
And this is the Atomsplit Rockin' and Drawing podcast. And today we're talking about
comic book distribution, the state of affairs. Given the recent virus lockdown and closing of things and history and how we got to this point. Very interesting. So, want to get right into it?
Sure.
All right. So, as you have taken notes, for more than 2 decades, comic book shops were supplied by a network of regional wholesale distributors.
Now this is before the 90s. So let's say before the 90s. So for 2 decades before the 90s.
When I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And you.
Late 60s to early 90s.
So there was a network of regional wholesale distributors that served specific geographic regions based on the locations of their warehouses. So I guess they got shipped to these warehouses from the printers.
Yeah. And
then they would send them out, kind of like the people that come in and put the cards and the magazines in the stores.
Yeah, exactly. In the stores, all of the stores.
Which was awesome back then.
Yeah.
That's how you and me for sure got into comic books. I miss that.
Yeah.
But we circle back to that. So then Marvel buys Heroes World Distribution and runs the regionals out of business.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean exactly? Heroes World was the store, wasn't it?
Well, it might have been a store, but it was a distribution company. And they...
Did this make it go national or something? To run the regionals out?
Yeah, they took I guess they took all of Marvel's business, which was the biggest at the time, and ran all of the regional distributors out of business so they could distribute where they used to distribute at. Because they couldn't compete with like the low rates. I guess Marvel wasn't paying any rates since they owned the distributor.
But at this point, they were still going to stores and.
I think
stuff.
So. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in retaliation to this, DC, this must have been later, Dark Horse, because they weren't around in the 70s. Image, etc.
All right, so Marvel bought Heroes World, like when they were close to being in Chapter 11, around the early 90s, let's say, like 91, because they were buying up a bunch of stuff at that time, like
Toy
Biz, Fleer, and they were like, hey, we'll just buy this distributor too, so we don't have to pay a distributor to distribute our comics. And, the comic shops, which is also called the wholesale market, have been around since the 70s, but they weren't...
That wasn't the only place you could get.
That wasn't the only place you could get comics, and they weren't, as many as there were now, and there's still not enough to serve as many people who could be buying comics.
So those DC Dark Horse Image signed an exclusive distribution deal with Diamond to get equal footing with Marvel and Heroes World.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then what happens?
So things are,
How long did that last? A couple of years?
I guess, yeah.
They're still going on.
A few years.
Yeah. And then in the 90s, Marvel goes bankrupt.
Middle 90s, yeah.
Middle
90s, Marvel goes bankrupt. And then they sell off a lot of, or fold a lot of stuff. And one of the things they got rid of, whether they sold it off or folded it or whatever was
Heroes World. The distribution. So then they had to go through Diamond, and they signed an exclusive distribution deal with Diamond.
They signed an exclusive distribution deal with Diamond, and Diamond became
the de facto monopoly.
The de facto monopoly
of comic book distribution.
Yeah.
As you so eloquently wrote. Even though there was an investigation with the Department of Justice to determine if it was indeed a monopoly, but they concluded that it was just a small portion of the book industry.
So in the mid-90s, Marvel signed with Diamond for whatever reason. I really couldn't figure out why. I couldn't find out why Marvel had a choice or not about whether to sign with Diamond. I don't know if it was they could have kept Heroes World or sign with somebody else, but either way, they signed with Diamond, and that created a de facto monopoly. Even though the Department of Justice investigated it, and they determined that it wasn't a monopoly because comics are just a small part of the book publishing.
Which doesn't seem fair because that's a completely different.
Well, they don't know what they're talking about.
Exactly.
You know,
it's paper and it's got a back and front. It's a book. Yes, it does have the word book in it.
Yeah.
So Diamond, as did Heroes World, dealt exclusively with comic book shops.
That's just another example. Hold on, just another example of the government putting all pegs in a square hole. I mean, it doesn't matter what shape the peg is. They're gonna smash it into the square hole. So that's what they've done. And because of that, they've ruined. They along with Marvel created a monopoly.
True that, brother. So at this point, they're dealing exclusively with comic book shops, and this cuts out all the venues that we grew up with.
Yeah.
That sold books such as gas stations, grocery stores, drug stores.
7-Elevens, Walmarts, Kmarts.
Yeah.
You know, all the places you would go as a kid, and
that was your goal. You just went, I'm going into the rack.
Yeah, the spinner rack.
Yeah, the spinner rack. God,
they killed the spinner rack.
Yep. So yeah, I remember the first dedicated comic book store opening in my hometown in the 80s, I guess. Geppi's Comic World.
Yeah.
Which was Diamond. And I can't remember whether that coincided with them not being available in, the Walgreens or whatever. But I remember being cool to also go to the comic book store because by that time I was a teenager. So now let's bring it up to now, when COVID-19 hits.
Okay.
Unless you got anything in between there. So basically, it's remained Diamond up until now, still going.
Yeah.
For, what's that? Almost 20 years. But now that the pandemic has hit, comic shops are shuttered while previously mentioned essential businesses remain open, like the drugstores and the grocery stores and the gas stations. Yeah. So Diamond has to stop distributing because there's no payments coming in from the closed comic shops.
Yeah. And then the comic shops can't sell anything to make money because Diamond's shut down. So, they've made a snake that eats its own tail. And Ouroboros. You can look that up.
How do you
Listeners.
spell that?
OROBOS.
All right. Some serious lightning going on out there.
Yeah.
You got it there too?
Got a little storm coming.
Little afternoon pre-summer thing going on.
Yeah.
So then Image, Aftershock, Archie, and others offer returnables to comic shops.
Mm-hmm.
But Marvel and DC do not.
Right.
So what does a returnable mean?
This is kind of, I guess I don't know anything about this part of comics, but from what I gather, returnables are if you don't sell books, you send them back to the publisher at 100% cost of what you paid for them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ordered if you ordered 100 books and you paid a $1 each for them, and then you didn't sell any of them, you get $100 back when you send them back.
Right, and you found out that returnables in the book industry were enacted after the Great Depression of the 1920s. Is that true?
That's what one of the articles I read said, because of the situation where bookstores, they didn't want bookstores to close because they couldn't return books.
Gotcha.
So that was one of
So
we're having a depression now.
So right now, Marvel only offers deep order discounts, no returnables, and is stopping all but a few essential digital comics.
Yep.
Okay. Right now, in this thing we're in.
Yeah, I don't know what an essential digital comic is. That's just what from.
Essential to who?
I don't know, but I wouldn't stop any digital comics.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. That DC's not stopping them.
So then, I don't know if I guess this is in the past few years. DC exercised, or is this recent? Tell me after I read it. DC exercised a clause in their contract with Diamond that released them from exclusivity 60 days before their contract renewal.
That's recent. That was like, they're gonna renew their contract in probably like 60 days before, say, March, probably this month.
Okay.
And when everything closed in March, they were like, well, we'll just get out of it now.
After this, they announced DC that they would offer some returnables and decided to seek out an alternative distribution networks, echoing a return to a distribution model like what it was before the exclusivity with comic book shops, which would allow them to distribute to comic shops that remained open during the initial shutdown. In addition, their new distribution method, DC is continuing to publish digitally, allowing them to keep most of their creators working, which is that's a valid good thing. I think.
So basically, what I guess what that means is, some comic shops didn't close because they were in areas that weren't hit nearly as hard as like New York and other big city areas, because they were in South Dakota.
Right.
So if you're in South Dakota and no COVID-19 is going on, and you got a comic shop and you're not getting comics because Diamond is shut down, then you got to get them comics somehow.
So comic shops that are shut down due to COVID-19 want to see the alternative distribution and digital publishing of comics to stop in order to make it fair for all comic shops.
Yeah.
Because they fear that if digital comics continue to be published and alternative distribution methods continue to thrive, they will lose customers and be stuck with unsaleable returnables. So, man, what a mess. So, on a related note, COVID-19, during the shutdown, graphic novel sales are up 43%, which adds another worry to their market, to the direct comic book shops, because Marvel has been distributing their graphic novels with Hatchet Books, while many others are still using Diamond Book distributors instead of Diamond Comic distributors. So yeah, you could see all the novels in the bookstore, and you couldn't find individual books.
And I think Diamond Books, as opposed to Diamond Comics, is still just distributing a little bit at the time. That's why, was still distributing. That's why the graphic novels were up, because I guess some bookstores were open while most comic shops weren't open.
So, do you think maybe, like when we were kids, we would go to the gas station or the 7-Eleven and be exposed for the first time to things on the rack, that since big bookstores came along, that young kids will now see the whole aisle of graphic novels instead, and have been exposed and turned on to comics that way? It's as opposed to the way we were?
Honestly, kids today, I mean, I don't see a kid going into a bookstore.
No, their parents took them in there.
Well, yeah, but even if they did, even if their parents took them into the bookstore, and even if they saw comics on the bookshelf,
graphic novels.
Yeah. I don't know that that would be their first choice of like how to consume that material. I think their first choice would be like, oh, I wonder if I can find this online. Because phone is king.
Excellent points. Yes.
Phone is first, then everything else. So
yeah.
So I mean, DC has the right idea, because phone is first, and I mean for older generations who are the ones kind of, they're scared to lose. I don't think they're gonna lose those guys, but they're not gonna keep them ever. They're not gonna live forever, and they're not gonna come into comic shops. See, the thing about the spinner rack, maybe if they had kept the spinner racks, those are good for, like, you want the newest mainstream thing, especially like, now that they have the movies out, you could always get the Avengers on the comic rack. You could always get Spider-Man. You could always get Batman. Comic shop is for things like our comic that you wouldn't see on a spinner rack, because we can't.
Right.
We can't.
Not that mainstream.
Print that many comics.
Yeah.
But they destroyed that. They destroyed that and moved everything to comic shops so they could charge more for the slick paper. And
but now
it's biting them.
It's biting them. Is it the end of the comic shop? For the single issue pamphlet to end?
I've been thinking it's the single issue pamphlet is going to end for a while. I've been thinking that's going to end for a while. This can only, it's going to end. This can only speed it up.
Okay, so I mean, newspapers and magazines, print, are all but dead.
All but dead.
To which the ones that still handle it are digital, and they charge, small. And then the same thing with music.
And newspapers.
So, I mean, in a way, you could say printed comics are lucky to have lasted this long.
Only because there's people who who are old and refuse to change. Like they're gonna want to have their comics every Wednesday at the comic shop. I mean, they like to go in there.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is they sell toys and posters, T-shirts, and so there is some money to be made in that arena. You can't get those weird action figures at Target. You can only get the Avengers ones there. So maybe all is not lost.
Well, all is not lost for the toy industry, but for the
the joy that I had buying Micronauts #1 at the drugstore, I wish somebody today could have.
Yeah. Going into a store and getting like 9 or 10 comics for
spinning the rack and going, holy mackerel, look at that.
Yeah.
And then going down to the ice cream store in the plaza and reading them while having some ice cream, and then riding my bike up there the next week. Yeah, but now everybody's just doing this.
Yeah.
So. Will comics now only be published as graphic novels or digitally? Very well could be.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think pamphlets are dead. If not, they're not dead yet, but they're on the way out.
Mm-hmm. Now, you question, how will this change comic book conventions going forward? Will there be new customers? Will old customers remain?
Well, I'm sure the old customers will remain, but how are they gonna,
Well, it could be like record shows today. It's a bunch of old guys just in a small ballroom at a hotel, not a convention center, looking for the print stuff,
Possibly, but
go down that route.
There's still conventions.
But like we talked about before, all the pop culture stuff.
There's that. That's like there's still conventions like San Diego where all of the movies and TVs announce their things. But there's also conventions that are not necessarily comic book pamphlet, just comic book pamphlet related. There's some conventions that are geared towards small press, like Small Press Expo. So like comics that are printed, but not a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
There's Emerald City Comic Con. That's mainly geared towards webcomics. There's Alternative Press Expo, kind of like comic books. Like conventions will have to diversify and not be all about like I don't know, like I don't know, Dragon Con is kind of diversified. They're about costuming now.
Yeah, I mean, swords and rings and medieval dresses. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Corsets. Very few comics. Oh, God. All right. So, here we are. That's a good discussion.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if they die or keep on going.
We'll keep you updated. Something's changing. I mean, this thing's changing a lot of things. So we'll see.
It's changed like the way Twitter does business.
Yep.
Because they were saying you can work from home forever, which if you can, why not? Why go out on the road when you don't have to? If you can.
Well, as long as you get your work done, I guess it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, If you don't get your work done, you probably wouldn't have got it done in the office anyway.
Right, exactly. You would have been the 3 hours a day you actually worked. Either way, it's at home or in an office. Doesn't matter. The rest of the time, as you looked at Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. All right, man. Let's see what you're doing there.
All right.
135.
Yeah, 135. Should go by fast now that I got other things settled.
All right.
Evil Disaster is beating the snot out of.
I love it.
Out of Good Disaster.
Yeah.
So.
That'd be a cool sticker or T-shirt or something. A first frame. Well, any of them. All right. And with that, I've got a retro video of Atomsplit in 1999 to play while you keep working, and then we'll close this out.
All right.
Star Bar, 1999. One of my favorite songs, Why Ask Why. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, here we go.
Kind of like a retro
Let me just add, I'm wearing sunglasses because I was trying to be way too cool. The very first year I wore sunglasses trying to be cool, but I don't think I really pulled it off. But here we go.
Jesus, where the hell are we? I had to ask myself why. Shut down. I had to ask myself why. Okay, we're back together now, and I'm coming apart. I am coming apart into pieces. Yeah, yeah. I am coming apart. It seems. Why ask why? Tuned in, tuned out, and all I could do is deny the antidote cuts my throat, and all I've got to do is deny. I am coming apart to pieces, yeah, yeah. I am coming apart to pieces. So fed up with your reasons, and I'm so fed up with your reasons. That's why. She sat down, displayed a frown, and all I could do was cry. We were still that persistent kill, and all I've got to do is deny. I am coming apart to pieces. Yeah, yeah. I am coming apart to pieces. And I'm so fed up with your reasons. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm so fed up with your things. I am sorry.
There we go.
All right.
That ends my screen share here. Share.
How many people were there?
It was a pretty good crowd. I mean, you saw some people walking back and forth. That was pretty good. It was probably a Wednesday night or something, not a Sunday.
Okay. Does it bother you when people walk around while you're playing?
Nah, not really. I'm just glad to see bodies. The other thing is my guitar, I put sparkly wrapping paper on it.
Okay.
So that's why it's all shiny. Because I really wanted to be Daniel Ash, I think, at that point. All right. Good discussion, good little tune. That's it for now.
That's it for now. Well, once again, this is G808.
DJD.